Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're very glad you're here today to celebrate with us at our virtual opening with Hiroyuki Hamada, Arthur Z, and Pauline Kim Harris and Conrad Harris of String Noise. I am Susan Whitus. I'm the director and curator of T-Space, and we're here on our grounds in Rhinebeck, New York. I'm right outside of our new archive building and research library. We're so happy that so many of our longtime friends are here today, as well as many new visitors to us, T-Space from around the world. I'll just say that after the hour-long presentations, we're going to follow up with a Q&A and discussion. That will be led by Irini Sahrelia, our Director of Education. And if you're not familiar with the Zoom webinar, know that the Q&A function is at the bottom, and feel free to ask questions on the chat during the event. Okay, now on with the show. We're starting with String Noise. They are known as New York's most daring violin duo. Since their debut in 2011, violinists Conrad Harris and Pauline Kim Harris have expanded the repertoire with over 50 new works, and they continue to break down the boundaries of traditional expectations and inspire innovative compositions while displaying great virtuosity. It was really a delight to welcome them to T-Space early. Yanis Xenakis, Mika and Mika S, Jesse Cox, Dark Light, and later String Noise will conclude our event with Michael Byron, Fabric for String Noise. And now, String Noise. Thank you. That was amazing, Pauline and Conrad. That was just marvelous to see and hear and in the space with the art and the light and the woods. Thank you so much. This year, we awarded our 8th annual T-Space Poetry Prize to the acclaimed poet, Arthur Z. And we're so happy to host him in a poetry reading today. Arthur is a poet, translator, and editor, and the author of 10 books of poetry, including Sightlines, Copper Canyon, which received the 2019 National Book Award in poetry. He's also a celebrated translator from Chinese, and his honors include many, many prestigious awards and fellowships. We're honored to have him here today. And I'd like to introduce Stephen Hall to say a few words to introduce Arthur. Stephen?
Can you hear me now? I was muted. You can hear me. So I'm very excited to hear Arthur, and was really enthusiastic that he accepted this, but I want to go back to my own relation to him. I've had his Archipelago collection from 1995 in my watercolor hut where I work by myself. I've had the little volume there for over 20 years. And I've read, sort of a dog-eared copy of his poems. But the reason I picked it up in the first place is it has a photograph of Ryongji Garden on the cover. Now, Ryongji Garden in Kyoto is probably one of the most mystical and mesmerizing spaces of all the Kyoto Zen gardens. And I first visited that garden when I worked in Fukuoka in 1990. And actually, I think I visited over 10 times. The last time was November with my wife, Dimitra, November of 2014. So that space, I think, is a way of connecting Hiroyuki and Hamada work to the poetry. And, one of the things about that place is it's very small, but it's super powerful. It's only 25 meters across, but it's incredibly powerful. And John Cage wrote 2 different pieces of music to Ryongji. And I mean, I've measured it. The Chapel of St. Ignatius in Seattle, the water garden is the same purport in the front of that chapel that we realized in 1997 is the same proportions as Ryongji. Of course, we didn't try to do the 15 mystical stones floating in a sea of white sand. We have one black rock from Mount Rainier. But so I thought that this moment was something special when I remembered that Ryongji was on the cover. And I also want to just say that 2 years ago, I was riding on the subway train from where I teach at Columbia University, and I saw Arthur Z's poem on the poster in the subway train. And I said, why have we never tried to have him come to T-Space? We never asked him yet. Can we just try? Because I always thought he'd turn us down. He's so famous. He's such, one of those big guys up there in the world of poetry. And he said, yes. So I'm very excited about that today. Thank you. Arthur.
Thank you, Stephen. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank Susan and Stephen and T-Space, and it's a pleasure to receive the Poetry Award, and it's thrilling to be here to share my poetry with String Noise and Hiroyuki Hamada's work. I've selected a series of short poems with different architectural contours to them. And I'm going to start with the poem called Midnight Loon. Burglars enter an apartment and ransack drawers. Finding neither gold nor cash, they flee, leaving the laundry and bathroom lights on. They have fled themselves. I catch the dipping pitch of a motorcycle, iceberg hues in clouds. The gravel courtyards of Midnight Garden, as in Japan, raked to resemble ocean waves in moonshine, whirlpool eddies, circular ripples. and nothing is quite what it appears to be. When I unlatch the screen door, a snake slides under the weather decking. I spot the jagged hole edged with glass where a burglar reached through the window. But no one marks the poplars, darker with thunder and rain. In moonlight, I watch the whirlpool hues of clouds drift over our courtyard, adobe walls, and gate. And though there is no loon, a loon calls out over the yard, over the water. Fault lines. He pours water into a cup. At room temperature, the cup is white. But after he microwaves it, and before steeping a tea bag with mint leaves, he notices outlines of shards have formed above the water. As the cup cools, the lines disappear. Now he glimpses fault lines inside himself and feels a Siberian tiger pace along the bars of a cell. Black, orange, white. Black, orange, white. And feels how the repeating chord sends waves through him. His eyes glisten and he tries to dispel the crests. But what have I done? What can I do? Throbs in his arteries and veins. Today, he will handle plutonium at the lab and won't consider beryllium casings. He situates the past in the slight aroma of mint rising in the air. Sometimes he feels like an astronaut suspended above Earth, twisting on an umbilical cord. Sometimes he's in the crosshairs of a scope, and tiger stripes flow in waves across his body. These next few poems are from Sightlines. This first poem is called Black Center. Green tips of tulips are rising out of the earth. You don't flense a whale or fire at beer cans in an arroyo, but catch the budding tips of pear branches and wonder what it's like to live along a purling edge of spring. Jefferson once tried to assemble a mastodon skeleton on the White House floor, but with pieces missing, failed to sequence the bones. When the last speaker of a language dies, a hue vanishes from the spectrum of visible light. Last night, you sped past revolving and flashing red, blue, and white lights along the road, a wildfire in the dark. Though no one you knew was taken in the midnight ambulance, an arrow struck a bullseye and quivered in its shaft. 1 minute, gratitude rises like water from an underground lake. Another, dissolution gnaws from a black center. This next poem is called Cloud Hands, which is a kind of warm-up position for Tai Chi and Qigong. It's a kind of centering and grounding warm-up exercise. Cloud Hands. A woman moves through a cloud hands position, holding and rotating an invisible globe. Thud, shattering glass, moan, horn blast. So many worlds to this world. 2 men dip net sockeye salmon at the mouth of a river. From a rooftop, a seagull squawks and cries. A woman moves through grasp the bird's tail. Someone on a stretcher is wheeled past glass doors. A desert 5-spot rises in a wash, and pressing her tongue to the roof of her mouth, she focuses in the near distance on the music of sycamore leaves. First snow. A rabbit has stopped on the gravel driveway. Imbibing the silence, you stare at spruce needles. There's no sound of a leaf blower, no sign of a black bear. A few weeks ago, a buck scraped his rack against an aspen trunk. A carpenter scribed a plank along a curved stone wall. You only spot the rabbit's ears and tail. When it moves, you locate it against speckled gravel. But when it stops, it blends in again. The world of being is like this gravel. You think you own a car, a house, this blue zigzag shirt, but you just borrow these things. Yesterday, you constructed an aqueduct of dreams and stood at Gibraltar, but you possess nothing. Snow melts into a pool of clear water, and in this stillness, starlight behind daylight, wherever you gaze. This next poem is in the voice of Salt Song. Zunis make shrines on the way to a lake where I emerge, and Miwoks gather me out of pools along the Pacific. The cheetah thirsts for me, and when you sprinkle me on ribeye, you have no idea how I balance silence with thunder in crystal. You dream of butterfly hunting in Madagascar, spelunking through caves echoing with dripping stalactites. And you don't see how I yearn to shimmer in orange aurora against flame. Look at me in your hand. In Egypt, I scrub the bodies of kings and queens. In Pakistan, I zigzag upward through 26 miles of tunnels before drawing my first breath in sunlight. If you heat a kiln to 2,380 degrees and scatter me inside, I vaporize and bond with clay. In this unseen moment, a potter prays because my pattern is out of his hands. And when I touch your lips, you salivate. And when I dissolve on your tongue, your hair rises, ozone unlocks. A single stroke of lightning sizzles to earth. This next poem is called kintsugi, which is a Japanese word that means golden repair. And in Japanese culture, when a ceramic pot is broken, instead of trying to glue the pieces back together and pretend that there isn't any breakage, in Japanese culture, the shards are glued back together with gold flecked lacquer, and the breakage is actually highlighted and honored. In this particular poem, silence is my gold lacquer. Kintsugi. He slips on ice near a mailbox. No gemsbok leaps across the road. A singer tapped an eagle feather on his shoulders. Women washed indigo-dyed yarn in this river, but today gallium and germanium particles are washed downstream. Once they dynamited dikes to slow advancing troops. Picking psilocybin mushrooms and hearing cowbells in the mist. As a child, he was tied to a sheep and escaped marauding soldiers. An apple blossom opens to 5 petals. As he hikes up a switchback, he remembers undressing her. From the train window, he saw they were on ladders cutting fruit off cacti. In the desert, a crater of radioactive glass. Assembling shards, he starts to repair a gray bowl with gold lacquer. They ate psilocybin mushrooms, gazed at the pond, undressed. Hunting a turkey in the brush, he stops. From the ponderosa pines, this next poem is called Sightlines, and it's set in the Milwaukee Valley, about 25 miles north of Santa Fe. And if you walk in that landscape and look west, you can see Los Alamos, the birthplace of the atom bomb, on one of the mesas. Sightlines. I'm walking in sight of the Rio Nambe. Salt cedar rises through silt in an irrigation ditch. The snowpack in the Sangre de Cristos has already dwindled before spring. At least no fires erupt in the conifers above Los Alamos. The plutonium waste has been hauled to an underground site. A man who built plutonium triggers breeds horses now. No one could anticipate this distance from Monticello. Jefferson despised newspapers, but no one thing takes us out of ourselves. During the Cultural Revolution, a boy saw his mother shot by a firing squad. A woman detonates when a spam text triggers bombs strapped to her body. When I come to an upright circular steel lid, I step out of the ditch. I step out of the ditch, but step deeper into myself. I arrive at a space that no longer needs autumn or spring. I find ginseng where there is no ginseng, my talisman of desire. Though you are visiting Paris, you are here at my fingertips. Though I step back into the ditch, no whitening cloud dispels this world's mystery. The ditch ran before the year of the Louisiana Purchase. I'm walking on silt, glimpsing horses in the field, fielding the shapes of our bodies in white sand. Though parallel lines touch in the infinite is here. And 3 last new poems. This first one is called Pitch Blue. I can't stop wading into a lake, skipping one flat stone after another across the surface of a pond. In a sarcophagus, lapis inlaid along the eyelids of a death mask. Wool oxidizing when pulled out of the dye bath. Like a deserted village with men approaching on horseback. The moment before collision. Never light this match. Sleepers. A black-chinned hummingbird lands on a metal wire and rests for 5 seconds. For 5 seconds, a pianist lowers his head and rests his hands on the keys. A man bathes where irrigation water forms a pool before it drains into the river. A mechanic untwists a plug and engine oil drains into a bucket. For 5 seconds, I smell peppermint through an open window. Recall where a wild leaf grazed your skin. Here, touch comes before sight, holding you. I recall across a canal the sounds of men laying cuttlefish on ice at first light. Before first light, physical contact or hearts beating, patter of female rain on the roof. As the hummingbird whirs out of sight, the gears of a clock mesh at varying speeds. We hear a series of ostinato notes and are not tied to our body's weight on earth. And my last poem is called Transpirations. Leafing branches of a backyard plum, branches of water on a dissolving ice sheet, chatter of magpies when you approach, lilacs lean over the road weighted with purple blossoms. Then the noon sun shimmers the grasses. You ride the surge into summer. Smell of pinon crackling in the fireplace. Blued notes of a saxophone in the air. Not by sand running through an hourglass, but by our bodies igniting. Passing in the form of vapors from a living body. This world of orange sunlight and wildfire haze. World of iron filings pulled toward magnetic south and north. Pool of quicksilver when you bend to tie your shoes. Standing, you well up with glistening eyes. Have you lived with utmost care? Have you articulated emotions like the edges of leaves? Adjusting your breath to the seasonal rhythm of grasses? Gazing into a lake on a salt flat and drinking in reflection the Milky Way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arthur. That was incredibly beautiful. Thank you. Hope to have you back again sometime in real life at T-Space to sit in the backyard and amongst the woodlands and hear more of your beautiful poems. Thanks. Hiroyuki Hamada's work. Hiroyuki Hamada is the recipient of many important fellowships and has been widely exhibited and collected and published. His most recent exhibitions at Bookstein Projects in New York, which was very beautiful, and Guildhall in East Hampton, where he lives. Thank you, Hiroyuki, for your generosity of spirit and mounting this beautiful show and the whole process, the virtual, the real, the process, the whole thing. And for sharing it with us virtually. We are very proud to premiere today the new exhibition video of Hiroyuki's recent work at T-Space, featuring a conversation with the artist and the critic Robert Morgan, and remarks by Stephen Hall. The video is by Jack of Diamonds Production, and the music courtesy of String Noise performing Unipolar Dance by Phil Niblock.
This is Robert C. Morgan. I'm a critic and artist, and I guess sometimes a curator and art historian. I'm with a very important artist that I have followed for a number of years. He is Hiroyuki Hamada. Now, I hear a lot of artists talk about materials and so forth, and one of the things that struck me, Hiroyuki, is the advanced idea of materiality.
The material, how they interact and manifest themselves are pretty much everything. Everything counts, all the materials, everything we see are part of everything, and we can't disregard certain things.
Having said that, do you have some idea of the kind of form that you're interested in pursuing before or during or after or all three?
Well, with the sculptures, the process of coming up with basic something, the starting point is there. Before I actually work on the material, I draw a lot, and something starts to emerge. And this process that comes before the actual sculpture making is very similar to making paintings.
This idea of moving toward the construct is very interesting to me. And I have to say, relative to your paintings, it makes so much sense seeing these in relation to your sculpture.
My sculptures came out of paintings. They sort of grew out of the wall. I was interested in object-like quality of the paintings, and then I was interested in texture and those things, as opposed to sort of like a window of illusionistic happening within it. When we stand back from this making process and try to analyze, there are distinctions, definite distinction between what we call painting and sculptures.
Sure.
But in the process of making, to me at least, they really merge together. And just like, you know, in nature we have a plain or field would meet forest. And in that area, there are particular habitats created by the condition. And I think the similar thing happened between painting and sculptures. In order to come to that point, I sort of relied on this sort of painting process. So there's again, illusionistic quality to suggest certain things on two-dimensional surface, and that's combined with the three-dimensional presence.
Yeah, you've mentioned illusion 2 or 3 times now, and Again, I would say that that's a very Western idea. And that leads me to the question is, do you feel that you are borrowing anything from your own heritage, or are you completely innovated with the Western point of view?
I was born in Japan. Japan was already incorporated into the Western hegemony, and with the capitalist framework and ideas of Western culture was permeating. But the interesting thing is that aesthetic environment was definitely different, I guess. Because I grew up in where I can go to be exposed to shrines or Japanese type structures or the culture itself. And I met this art teacher, and that was the first experience I really saw art in practice, what art can do. I didn't really grow up in an environment where art was around, so I didn't even know that art can do what music could do, literature could do. The lines would have effect on me. They can actually speak better than me trying to speak English.
Where do you feel you're going at this point in terms of your thoughts about your work?
I've been thinking about how I place myself in the whole thing as a person.
When you say the whole thing?
Our society, how art is relating to it, the social structure we have, which is very feudalistic. It's very hierarchical. And art, on the other hand, is means to connect ourselves to humanity, what we call humanity, whatever we perceive it as humanity, and hopefully that goes beyond what we perceive as society. So it's an interesting situation for artists who we are all within this framework. We are all products of what it is. But at the same time, we also have the understanding of where we are going as a species. And so the role of artists to see it objectively and share the perception is extremely important.
I like very much the fact that there is, a lot of space, because I think that one of the things that is often lacking in exhibitions is a clear understanding of the space in relation to the work.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And I think having 3 of these down here and 2 up there is great, honestly. So, and I would say that this space of Stephen Hall is absolutely perfect for your work.
But what I see and feel in the work is the concepts, deep concepts of wabi-sabi, of Japanese wabi-sabi. The sabi is the darkness, the wabi is the way that the thing can weather forever and look better in time. And when I think of the work, I think of the 1933 book, In Praise of Shadows by Tanizaki, which was a book about subtleties and nuances. These paintings are made of charcoal and wood and paper, and they have a kind of mystery that I can't really explain. And when I look at them, I feel there's something going on here, and I think one of the reasons he doesn't title these works is they can speak to anyone in any language at any age. Maybe that's the mysterious power of the work.
My idea of what I'm doing is that it's the culmination of my understanding of my surrounding. It somehow resonates with our whole being. And I just use the word expression to say that I'm talking about that. But again, it comes back to what we're talking about, the society being feudalistic, and we have certain ideas officially, and certain idea that's more grounded to the reality, and we have difficulty talking about. It's a very interesting time because we even have a hard time talking about art because of this double talk situation.
A moment ago you were talking about the whole thing, and part of that is how art relates to humanity, okay? This is a term that you use, which I like that term very much, okay? I don't hear enough of it, but I like hearing it. And I think that for us to exceed or get beyond this feudal process of thinking, and that's where it begins, of course, we have to get back to that inauguration, that presentation of humanity as central to our work.
Right. I mean, the process of making itself is very, very rooted in this condition. The fact that everything has its meaning and we perceive. And I, as a person who's looking at these things and managing these things, I have to be able to see the dynamics that's creating the harmony within it. And
within the work.
Right. I mean, this process has to be very, very honest. I have to really, really respond to the essence of each element. But in real society, we have certain emphasis. Certain things are more valuable, other things are not valuable. And this is the root of propping up the feudal society, because we have this mentality to prop up something that's important. That's, if it's attached to money, if it's attached to the power structure, that's more important. But when we walk in the studio, we face the elements. It's an honest process.
One of the aspects of this conversation with you this afternoon is the fact that you are fearless in terms of your openness, and at the same time you're extremely discreet and elegant in terms of how you present yourself. And I'm very taken by that. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed the conversation. I mean, from my end.
Thank you so much.
And how much I've learned, okay, in the process. And it's a pleasure to be here with you, okay? I've seen many shows here, but this is something, you're an artist that I did not know other than through your work, So now the work and the artist come together, and that's the best of all possible worlds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so very much, Hiroyuki, and everyone. This has been really stimulating, and many people are thanking you. It's very powerful. The close-ups, the textures, it brings out lots of feelings and beautiful energy. Thank you very much. And thank you all. And I would like to open up to our audience. And there are some questions that are already coming in from the attendees. Feel free to ask questions relating to everything that you've heard today, from the music to poetry to art. So I actually had a follow-up question from the conversation that we were watching for Hiroyuki. So Hiroyuki, how would you respond to Stephen's comments about the relationship of your work to Tanizaki's In Praise of Shadows? How did you think about that?
I'm not really sure. I'm not really familiar with the material, but I'm sure that's something we can always appreciate. What we do in our studios, what writers do, what musicians do. There are interesting parallels, and as we show in the musical performance and the poetry in the space, I think so. That was very, very interesting comment. I appreciated that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, how do you respond to the idea of kintsugi that Arthur Zeh brought earlier up about the themes in the Japanese culture, and how putting back together, showing those connections?
Right. That's totally sort of similar thing as what I was trying to explain about everything counts when we are in the studio. All the dynamics, all the manifestations of the elements, we look at those things and they matter. We don't hide. One layer leads to another layer, and the relationship manifesting something without judgment. Things happen, and so it is an insightful angle, definitely, I think.
I'd just like to say something about the film, which I think is really good. The way that the interview brought out your thoughts, and it's completely central to the idea of the whole formation of T-Space. 10 years ago, we decided to have this little gallery. Nothing is for sale. It's all about the spiritual dimension of art being the primary thing. And interestingly enough, we had some high rollers like Ai Weiwei and Bryce Martin say they would show in T-Space. But the points that you made out, I just recently read in White Hot magazine, a little online magazine by the cultural critic Donald Cuspit. He's one of the great critics of art, and he talks about the importance of our moment. And this article from 2019 says that he's arguing that the critical consciousness is on the verge of being stamped out by economic consciousness. And I think that's what Hamada was saying about feudal society. And in a way, this is one of the central missions of T-Space, is to try to reunite poetry, music, art to a certain spiritual food for thought, instead of this dominance by money values. Most of the art world today is when some painting is sold for 6 million or whatever, that becomes a so-called success. But that's not a success. That's a success in another system of values, the feudal society values. So I think that's one of our central missions. So I was very excited how today comes together because of what you said in the film, the sort of central ideas of what we started with 10 years ago. So this is our kind of 10th season, 10-year anniversary. So anyway, if anybody wants to read, Donald Cuspid is, I think he's 83 years old and he's still writing. He has a number of new articles. And actually one of them, Art Criticism by Artists, a case study by Donald Cuspid, has our good friend Gary Stefan, who we showed at T-Space 3 years ago.
If I can start maybe reading out some questions from the audience. Some are for Hamada in terms of materiality, which materials you use in your paintings and sculptures.
With the paintings, I use acrylic paint primarily because of the speed and, but you never know. I'm really open to different things, and I experiment all the time. And with sculptures, I've been using resin, which is relatively light, pretty strong, and it's easy to manipulate. And so that's what I've been doing lately.
There is another question relating to that. If you're using lead, L-E-A-D, to
Oh,
cover your curved gray forms.
Right, that's somebody else mentioned that, and it's actually a pigmented resin. It's a very interesting material because depending on how you treat, depending on how you sand, depending on how you polish, how you leave it without treatment, with treatment, and you can express so many things. So the surface that's looking like lead is actually pigmented resin.
There is a question again about this exhibit where this Amy is Charlotte is asking whether these pieces were made specifically and only for T-Space after seeing the space, or did they previously exist and tell the story, and then you, Mr. Hamada, chose to exhibit them in this way?
Well, these are recent pieces of mine. The paintings are done a few years ago, and the sculptures are the latest ones. And what we did was I work with Bookstein Projects gallery in New York City, and they know my work very well. And we had a meeting with the space and the pieces, and we came up with options, and we basically we went to the space and we struggled. We tried different placements, and that's how it went, basically.
I take one more question for Hamada's work before maybe we can open it up to others as well. Kyle Hunt is asking, are the first few layers of your paintings meant only to build texture, or do you aim for a finished painting within those first few layers? In other words, for you, is there a distinction between painting and building texture?
Well, the process of making painting is really, really interesting. I feel like it's a very, very special thing, because to me, with painting, I don't have any plans. I would go in with clear mind, and I would react to my first impulse. Maybe something I see on the surface, maybe something to do with the lighting that day, feeling, and then that leads to something else, and that leads to something else. And after a while, there's a structure with this conversation with elements and myself. So it's a very, very honest, authentic process of structure building. And so I don't really plan certain things. The things emerge from the dynamics and relationship of the elements in the painting.
Anne-Marie is asking, this may be a question for all of you, which person's books, music, or landscape is inspiring for you? Perhaps each one of you can reference a couple of your inspirations, if you like. Is there a book you're recently reading or music that you find particularly inspiring?
I guess I can jump in and say that when I'm stuck as a poet, I like to go to very ancient sources, which in many ways are also very contemporary. So there's a wonderful book in ancient Chinese literature called Tian Wen, which it could be a verb, it could be a noun. Tian is like sky or heaven, and Wen is questions. So it could be like questions about heaven or questioning heaven, or anyhow, the text is apocryphal, but appears to be written by the first poet known in Chinese literature, Chu Yuan. So the work is, 2,000 years old. And the poem is a series of questions with no answers. So when I am sort of not sure what to do next, I find it a wonderful source of inspiration. And frankly, I will be honest and say that many of those questions have found their way into my poems. And some of those questions, for instance, are what is composed of brightest bright and darkest dark? They're just really provocative questions, and they've sort of haunted me. And so that's a source of inspiration for me.
Go ahead.
Well, for us, I think the most recent inspiration was being up in T-Space after having been in isolation in our little apartment in New York City, and a lot of space and the visuals and architecture have inspiration in the acoustic and the way we perform. So being in the space and playing the acoustics of the gallery and finding all the different lights and changing of the light of T-Space, and just being in another world. You step into that space and you're transformed.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to go in there and pick different spaces for different pieces and choose just not where it sounds the best, but also what it looks like visually.
And then to be amidst the artwork in person, that was
inspiring
and powerful.
The reverberation time in that space is almost 2 seconds.
Yeah,
and as an architect, you're not allowed to build anything like that. If I had a client, they wouldn't allow it.
Really?
Oh, really?
No, because it's too it's like a cave, And when I built the Chapel of St. Ignatius, I was trying to make a nearly 2-second reverberation time exactly for that chamber music that they would play there, and the physical planning department said, no, we're going to put in speakers, and so they put in a $40,000 speaker system, and guess what? They never use it.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And in the Chapel of St. Ignatius, the reverberation time is about 1.9.
Oh.
The problem with T-Space, if there's no one in it, it's too much. It's 2 seconds. So I was very surprised that you went in and did it in there, because it's like right at the edge of bouncing back in your face.
Well,
right?
the pieces that we chose were pretty good for that too. We feel like
it worked. It worked for you, but I mean, you had to work with that 2-second reverberation time. My daughter loves to go in there and yell because it echoes back at her.
Yeah. So
and of course, Xenakis was an architect first.
Yes.
Working for Le Corbusier, and he got inspiration from architecture and lines and drawing, and so when a lot of people hear his music, it sounds very kind of industrial or you imagine engines running or effects like that. So that's what I think about when I hear his music. But it all comes from his early works with architecture.
Absolutely. He did the Phillips Pavilion in Brussels in 1958. I studied his work. In fact, my wife, Dimitra, we met because of Xenakis. and
Oh.
he did a piece of architecture based on a piece of Xenakis music. Years ago, they played in Carnegie Hall a famous Xenakis piece that had never been played before because there were something like 140 orchestral instruments that were required to play this piece. And he was there. He was in the second row. And I was up in the balcony. It was a long time ago. And I saw him down there. And after the piece was played, I ran down and I went up to him and I said, listen, I'm an architect. And I know that you work for Le Corbusier. And I was shaking his hand and I said, you're the only architect who worked for Le Corbusier who was given credit for design. And he said, you designed the mullions in the monastery of La Tourette. And I'm shaking his hand and Xenakis goes, I designed La Tourette.
Yeah, I know. He had to fight. He had to fight with Le Corbusier to get partial credit for the Philips Pavilion in Brussels.
But he did the Philips Pavilion. He did the
yeah,
Philips
he did it.
Pavilion.
I know, but at first it was just labeled Le Corbusier, and then he got credit.
Right.
Yeah.
Xenakis is a very important figure in this. Let's say the bridge between music, poetry, and architecture. I think he stands for amazing ways that conceptually and intellectually. And and I think now his work is finally being appreciated, I think, in ways that it wasn't 20 years ago. But so I was really excited about your piece because you did it in that 2-second acoustic volume. I mean, I couldn't believe it.
It's fun playing there.
Great.
Thank you.
There is, if we can maybe take one last question, and I'll try to answer some of the other ones that relate to T-Space. There is a lot of appreciation about the honesty in the work that has been presented here. Carol Griffin is referring to the interview specifically with Hamada's work, but I think this is something that relates to all of you. The question is about light and shadow for Mr. Hamada by Amy Chalud. In approaching the spiritual aspects of your work, do you see primarily light or primarily shadow? And a follow-up question that maybe the musicians can answer this as well, although I think you already touched on it a little bit.
That's really hard question to answer because my angle is, well, when I'm in the studio, I am very, very passive. I observe and I try to listen, and I let things speak and things emerge, and I cherish and embrace that, and I try to cultivate. So it's really not much of picking one way or the other. I almost think that you have to ask what's going on, whatever that's in the studio that's happening at the moment. So I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered that or not, but that's my answer.
We have to.
Yeah, we agree. I mean, it depends on the music, and it also depends on your personal reaction at that particular moment when you're playing that piece, and the space can also influence that. But primarily, for me, it's the music, the specific piece that you're playing, how you approach it, and what aspects you want to bring to that particular piece. And again, I'm not sure if I really answered the question, but.
You are, yes, both. Thank you. There is a question from Sarah Lutz about whether it is possible to visit the exhibition or the T-Space is closed until post-COVID, you guessed right. But there are two intimate events, and I will put that in the chat if you like, on August 29th and on September 26th. This is also virtual, but one is with Robert Morgan and the other with the painter and curator Elena Sisto. For a limited audience, only 15 tickets for each one of the two events. So I'll put that in the chat if you're interested to make arrangements for that. And I think we can move on to the finale of the event with String Noise, performing Fabric for String Noise by Marion Bryan. Thank you.
Thank you all. It was wonderful. And thanks to everyone for coming. There's 2 more events coming up that Irini talked about. Check our website. We also have on our website, we're very proud on our whole summer, all of our summer events are recorded. A bunch of incredible residency lectures, earlier ensemble event. So anyway, keep up with our mailing list, give a donation so we can keep going. And we hope to see you all next summer in real life in the Woodlands and T-Space. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. I can leave now.